So there he is, Sheriff Joe, as they call him, Joe Arpaio. We have made a promise that we are going to stay on top of this story for you, especially given the details that have been coming out over the last 48 hours. We've talked to lawyers. We've talked to police officials from Arizona. Now we want to bring in somebody who's got a lot to do with this law, Dan Stein. He's the president of FAIR, the Federation for American Immigration Reform. Dan and I have gone around and around on this issue for years now, as really the country tries to deal with this issue in many ways. And let's start there, Dan, Dan, good to see you, sir.
Always good to see you, Rick.
Hey, let's start there. Since I just mentioned that you and I have been talking about this for the last several years, and it has been an important national issue, how did this all of a sudden become just Arizona's issue, Arizona's controversy? And how do you think that'll eventually play into a national solution to this problem?
Well, ultimately, Rick, this is about reasserting federal and state integration in federal immigration enforcement. Historically, states and the federal government are partners in carrying out federal immigration law, but as a result of litigation brought about by MALDAF and the ACLU over 20, 30 years, the states were neutralized into compliance or participation or verification with the federal government before giving out services or taxpayer money to illegal aliens.
Well, here we got the state.
Arizona is trying to do.
Well, but hold on. Here we got what you just said makes a lot of sense, except here we have the federal government now suing the state of Arizona, saying, look, this is not your turf. Get out. Let us handle this.
You know, look, I read the brief very carefully. You know, it's interesting, Rick, that the administration's public statements, that brief does not mention racial profiling in any significant manner. Its entire argument is preemption, meaning that the federal government decides all immigration matters, which of course is true, and there's nothing about the Arizona law that changes that. The federal government doesn't have to deport anybody it doesn't want to. But the most important aspect of the administration's brief is this. It's a shocking challenge to the balance of power between the legislative and executive branches, in that the administration says, if we decide to not enforce immigration law on a class-based, wholesale-wide, involving millions and millions of people, then we're essentially going to be in a position of deciding who comes into this country and then going to Congress periodically and saying, all right, you're going to have to retroactively ratify the people we've let into the country illegally through unlimited prosecutorial discretion. That is a rapid change in the balance of power. It is Congress who decides who comes in, how many, under what terms, not the executive branch. If the president doesn't want to enforce America's immigration policy, he needs to explain why he's not doing it. And frankly, he's the executive. He's the chief executive. We need another president if he's not going to enforce the law, Rick.
Well, hold on a minute, because you know what? To be fair, this is what else they talk about. They say that Arizona could quite possibly violate the constitutional rights, not of people who are here illegally, but of people who are here legally. That's one of the points they make, Dan, to be fair. In fact, let me read it to you. The lawsuit says, this is from page 3, line 6, it will cause the detention and the harassment of authorized visitors to the United States, immigrants and citizens who do not have or carry identification documents specified by the statute. In other words, you know what they're saying. They're essentially saying, you know, Dan Stein or Rick Sanchez are walking down the street, some cop can come up and start hassling us and asking us for papers. Well, as citizens of the United States, we shouldn't be hassled. The Constitution says we shouldn't be hassled,
well, you know,
in an effort to get some guy who they think might be illegal.
Look, Rick, they've been trying to make that argument, at least the ACLU has, rhetorically. That's been the argument for years while they've intimidated states in deciding consent orders not to verify status.
But that's an important argument, Dan. But Dan, that's an important argument, man. Come on.
Proof.
I mean, you can't.
But it's perspective. Rick, it's an important argument, but not if it's untrue. Right now, the law hasn't even been implemented or enforced. The responsible decision would have been for the federal government to wait and say, all right, in deference to the state's prerogatives in these areas, knowing that all Arizona wants to do is assist the federal government in doing what the American people want, let's wait and see how the law is actually enforced.
That's a good point.
They made a political judgment. They made a political judgment here, Rick. They decided, look, illegal aliens don't vote. So who ultimately are they pandering to? It's organizations like the SEIU tied into machine-style political turnout for the November election.
Well, you know, but Dan, to be fair,
it's ultimately about energizing a political base.
I got to stop you there, because if I was talking to the other side right now, they'd be saying the exact same thing about the Republicans, that they're pandering to groups made up of people who simply want to be coming at this from a nativist standpoint. So, I mean, you know, the accusations can go both ways. Guys like you and I get together once in a while so we can try to find common ground in the middle, because that's the only way this is going to be settled. But, hey, Dan, can you hold on for just a moment?
Let's find common ground.
We got breaking news. We got breaking news. I got to stop you for just... FAIR is an organization that's been trying to get our government to get its act together for a long time now as far as some kind of coherent immigration policy. He's arguing that what Arizona is doing is a step in the right direction. I would imagine you are arguing as well, and I think I heard you say this earlier, Dan, that what the Obama administration is doing by challenging it is a mistake.
Well, I think they're usurping Congress's prerogative with some of their comments, but I also think Arizona should be suing the federal government because the federal government's not doing the job. Federal government ought to be handling illegal immigration, but certainly ought to be telling the states what kind of programs to implement to ensure illegal aliens don't get driver's licenses, to ensure there's sort of various point of interest verification procedures. And actually, what the administration is doing is setting up a real dilemma. The president is saying we're not simply going to enforce immigration law. Now, if the president wants his big mass amnesty, and we do not support that, and we hope he doesn't get it, he ought to be telling people, look, if I establish a cutoff date and people are not going to be eligible after that, how is the federal government going to actually establish that demarcation line?
But I guess
instead, he sues Arizona,
the question...
and he essentially says, you're out of luck, American people. There's nothing the federal government can do to enforce our, you know, to stop illegal immigration.
Well, to represent the federal government's position on this, they're saying, A, what Arizona's trying to do is against the supremacy clause of the United States Constitution, which says that's just not your turf. That's something that the federal government's supposed to take care of. And B, they're also saying that it comes into areas of violations of not only the rights of some people who may not be citizens in this country, but they necessarily may not be deportables either. But the other point that I have to raise with you is when you look at the crime stats, in fact, when you look at most of the statistics regarding Arizona, you see reasons that make you wonder why it is that Arizona is trying to enact this in the first place, at least given the timing. I mean, Dan, I'm looking at some numbers here, and I looked these up this morning with from the FBI crime stats. Crime in Arizona has gone from 2008 to 2009. It was 1,165 in Mesa. Now it's 979. Phoenix, it went down by about 200,000. Tucson, it went down by about 100,000. It's boring to read all these numbers, but I mean, you can take my word for it. I can send it to you later. Illegal immigrants in the United States, it's gone down since 2007 by 1 million people. So here we are at a point where we're actually looking at maybe the things that you and I have been talking about in the past that were problems going down, and yet now's when we want to install rules like the one that people are saying in Arizona that is extremely controversial. You could argue that maybe we don't need this. Go ahead.
I'm really thinking you and I, we must occupy the same planetary space and see the same world. I thought there were Mexican drug cartels threatening the very sovereignty of Mexico, the legitimacy of the Mexican government.
Well, but how so? See, here
you're talking about drug violence, drug crime, drug corruption.
That's beautiful.
Right up and down the line.
But that's gorgeous. But let me, well, it may be true, but let me bring up what I would do, and I understand this. If I were arguing from your perspective, and I had a tough time trying to get Americans to agree with me, and I wanted to demonize illegal aliens, you know what I would do? I would somehow find a way to tie them to the drug cartel and to tie them to smugglers. But Dan, the fact of the matter is, most of the people who've come to the United States have nothing the hell to do with drug cartels or nothing the heck to do with smugglers either. It's like an easy Machiavellian way of getting people to dislike illegal immigrants by somehow saying they're all drug dealers. I mean, I'm sorry, but that seems to be the motivation.
You're not very... You seem to be shifting the terms of the discussion. Well, first of all, your first
No, you are, man.
You said crime has gone down.
I asked you about crime going down, and you start talking about drug cartels.
Well, look, you have to take a look at qualitatively what's going on, the kind of violent crime and the kidnappings, not only in the MSAs of Arizona, but also in the rural counties, the border counties, and the areas in the suburban counties outside the main MSAs. The trends, Arizona is at the top or near the top of the FBI crime data per capita for states in the United States.